within crisis, but out of the norm. And so that is what motivated me to look at this, because during the lockdown, it was interesting to see what was happening back in the Caribbean. So what we hope to see is what flexibility is. I like the age-freeness of creativity. I like the agelessness of creativity. And of course, we know about the flexibility and the versatility. We know that. But there was a time when people used to think only certain people can be creative. But creativity is in the realm of every living, thinking human being, regardless of age. And of course, we know there's a strong connectivity between creativity and innovation. And I've often seen how during crisis, how Caribbean people just come to the fore, all the creative elements start budding. And I want to just emphasize to education systems that there's a role for creativity and innovation during troublesome times. So all ministries of education should make it pivotal to learning and teaching activities. Gavin's presentation, he spoke about the curriculum. And I think that is exceptionally important, the teaching methods, how we evaluate, exceptionally important. So Ministry of Education need to pay some attention to this. As always, this is probably not very creative, but it's coming to use quotes to encapsulate the entire presentation. So I have creativity, as has been said, consists of largely rearranging what we know in order to find out what we do not know. Hence, to think creatively, we must be able to look afresh at what we normally take for granted. So we need some fresh thinking. And it's strange for us that it's in crisis that we find those fresh thinking. The second quote is, it's easy to come up with new ideas. The hard part is letting go of what worked for you 2 years ago, but will soon be out of date. And I think Gavin alluded to that in his presentation, where people are afraid to move on because they're accustomed to something for so long that they're afraid, they don't want anything to be outdated. But that is where creativity comes in. And the last quote, creative activity could be described as a type of learning process where teacher and pupil are located in the same individual. And this is what I saw in the schools that Gavin presented, that the creativity is not limited to the teacher or these pupils. They're all rolled up into one. So that's one of the changes. Now, welcome to a creativity-friendly Caribbean. For those of you who are not familiar with the Caribbean islands, I just want to point out some of the groupings we have. And you may have noticed that this map, this particular map, you don't always see Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela. You don't always see them on Caribbean maps. That's because they're part of the mainland territories. But they're actually, if you notice the Caribbean Sea, their shores are washed by the Caribbean Sea. So hence they are part of the Caribbean basin. So that is what makes the Caribbean so interesting. We have mainland territories, those that are on the mainland of Central and South America, but because they are washed by the Caribbean Sea, they're part of us. And we also have islands that are not washed by the Caribbean Sea, they're bang in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but they're still part of us. Like the Bahamas, for example, and Turks and Caicos. the US and British Virgin Islands. Now, Cuba is, as you see, and the Cayman Islands, they share the Caribbean borders. So it's Jamaica and Haiti. But when you turn and you look at those little islands, those islands are also divided into groupings. And you have, they're called the Leeward Islands and the bigger Leeward and Windward Islands. The Windward Islands to the south and the Leeward Islands to the north. Now, there's something missing from this map. If you know the Caribbean very well, you may wonder, where is Barbados? It's not on this map. That is because Barbados is south of Trinidad. It's not washed by the Caribbean Sea. It's bang in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but we claim Barbados is still part of the Caribbean. So you see, the Caribbean has a very interesting history, topography, geography, everything that makes up the Caribbean area. But as you will see, the reason why later, the reason why the Caribbean is the way it is. Okay. So we have genuine creativity requires further elements above mere novelty. It has to be relevant. It has to be effective. And I think I can vouch for these two very, very special qualities, effectiveness and relevance. It's during crisis that we find the need for things that are relevant, that will help us to come out of the crisis, to help us to deal with the crisis. And whatever we do have to be effective so that we can survive the crisis. So I like how Cropley said, the production of relevant and effective novelty, because we can have all kinds of creativity. Everybody is, in a way, creative, but whether or not what they create is effective and relevant is another matter. And I really like this because it's all about survival in times of crisis. So we see how the relevance shines through. Now, we need to be ethical when we are looking at creative products or even creative thinking. We are not alone. We have people around us who we should think about. And this, we have feelings like empathy, as Gavin emphasized. So we need to have a strong sense of ethics, the originality and the effectiveness and the relevance. But what I like is the complexity. It's not always straightforward that the ideas come about, or can they be made, can they be manifested? There's some element of complexity within all this creativity. And I think that's what gives this complexity that gives creativity its creativeness and make it relevant as well. Now, very often we use creativity and innovation interchangeably, and we could understand why. There is some difference, but they also share quite a lot. So, like Tufi says, anyone can be creative, and you come up with this excellent idea, what you have created. So how are we going to take that forward? We need to be innovative. So you have to take that idea and develop that idea into something useful and something practical. So creativity and innovation, they go hand in hand. Because it makes no sense to me to have this brilliant idea and sweep it under the desk or the table or the bed. We need to take that and develop into something. So yes, we use them interchangeably, but we should be mindful of the subtle differences. Okay, here are some other words that are associated with creativity and with innovation. And we have the big ideas for creativity. We have all the concepts and everything, the nice thoughts coming through. But you see where the implementation comes in? On the innovation. And again, that change is coming back. So you may have an idea, you implement, you invent something and you go through it and it works, but you look at that very same thing and you see, okay, perhaps if I do this, it will fit better here or fit better there. So the need for change. And that word is very, very important when it comes to the creative process. So it's a continual brainstorming effort where you keep coming up with these ideas. You keep inventing, you keep implementing. But there's also a need to recognize when there's a need to change and how useful, how relevant is that change. And within all of these, you can see the complexity coming out. It's a complex action to go back and forth between creativity and innovation. But it's necessary if we are going to be effective. It's very, very, very necessary to have that back and forth between creativity and innovation. Now, World Creativity Day. You see, I think our leaders recognize that creativity is important. And although World Creativity Day did not begin with the UN, eventually they came on stream. And every year, because the first one in 2008, I think, was in May. And since they came on stream, every April 21st, World Creativity Day. And I think they have recognized, some of them, the need to go forward, the need to change, the need to interpret the world within a different sort of ethos than the four walls ethos that we have in schools. And the need for that space, the need to think, the need to be open. And even today, even in this year, within lockdown, World Creativity Day still went on. And it was interesting to see how, again, the Caribbean, who didn't really focus on World Creativity and Innovation Day, have been responding to this by generating new ideas as to how to deal with the pandemic. So I support the Creativity and Innovation Day to an extent, but I think it should go more than just observing the day. I think it should go beyond April 21st every year. I really think that every day is Creativity Day. But until we give focused attention to how schools function, to how ministries of education function, to how other ministries function, the Creativity and Innovation Day is of no avail. But on the other hand, it's good for the recognition that it has been getting, and I hope it will even prompt some of our non-creative leaders to think creatively. So now, back to the Caribbean. All these photos came from the Caribbean area, and they were chosen with a lot of care. Now, the Caribbean went on the lockdown like every place else. And the interesting thing about the Caribbean is that the corona got to them because someone from either the USA or the UK traveled to the Caribbean and was found to be positive. So all first cases in the Caribbean were migrant cases. And these pictures were chosen because the first one on the left, sorry, we are closed due to COVID. That one came from Barbados. The one on your right came from Antigua. And the beach was specifically chosen because you may have known that Antigua has a beach for every day of the year, 365 beaches. And when it's a leap year, we have a one for the leap year as well. So 366 beaches. And this beach scene is reminiscent of people just now on the beach wearing a mask. You know, that's what Antigua represents, beaches. And on the bottom left, St. Martin. And the reason why St. Martin is there is because a creative idea began in St. Martin and it floated right around the Caribbean. A young man in St. Martin thought, well, Caribbean is noted for its music. We have so many genres of music. So how are we going to deal with this lockdown? There is a line or a musical line that we call Santimanity, that it's a tune that you put words to it, but it remains the same tune, but it tells a message. And this young man in St. Martin came up with a lovely, lovely, lovely lockdown message. He called his friend in Trinidad and he said, what do you think we can do? So Trinidad, being the Calypso and the soca country in the Caribbean, decided that they're going to invite people from all over the Caribbean to take part in this Santimanity by using something to help them to deal with the crisis, to send a message to all the islands. So in every island, the idea started in St. Martin, call his friend in Trinidad, and from Trinidad, they have sent what you call a challenge to other islands to do the same. So that went right around the Caribbean, beginning in St. Martin to Trinidad and from Trinidad out. I hope that I'll be able to, now, here is the calendar. Every month we can find a festivity going on in the Caribbean, some great festival that the whole world descends on. But during the corona, from March to September, from March right down to September, all festivities have been cancelled. Now, fortunately for Trinidad, Trinidad's festival is in February. So they just escaped the lockdown. January, I think we had like Curacao and Aruba and Bonaire and St. Kitts Nevis, and so they escaped. But those to come had to close down. And Antigua, which is the international gateway for, one of the international gateways for the Caribbean, the first British Airways flight that came from the UK had someone on it that's positive. And this is how they responded. So these are just, this middle picture is from Barbados. The one on the far right is from St. Vincent, but all of them had to cancel. Now, this book is a very, very interesting book, Music as Creative Practice by Nicholas Cook. It is so interesting. I took part of the abstract so that you can see what it's all about. And I like, it goes from changing concepts from old times to present day. And his approach to musical creativity attuned to the practices of both music and everyday life. And that's exactly what the Caribbean people have done. They have used their creativity in the music sphere because of the link between creativity and music to go around. But this is a book that I really enjoy, and I hope that you could have a look at it at some time. So again, we have creativity and music going hand in hand. Now, a study was done to look at the creativity types by Margaret Resinos. And what she found, of the 6 types she had, these were the 2 that she found that would link. Deliberate and cognitive creativity, deliberate and emotional creativity, spontaneous and cognitive, spontaneous and emotional. And I highlighted those 2 because I think those are the 2, the spontaneous and cognitive, spontaneous and emotional, that really I see manifesting themselves in the Caribbean region, in the musical sphere. And they're both linked to divergent thinking. This thing about happy music. For those of you who are familiar with calypso and soca and stuff, you would realize that it's a happy beat, and it's created by people who are generally happy in spite of. So the lockdown didn't overshadow that happiness, and it's within that happiness that came the spontaneity to use music to deal with the lockdown. I use this music sheet deliberately because although a number of people in the Caribbean read music well, the spontaneity that comes from it, they do not use musical notes. They do not need musical notes to show how they can just be spontaneous with music and creativity. Okay. I really like this because a song, a poem, or a calypso, we are seeing here how the brain, what side of the brain is connected to creativity. But listen to this. If creativity is understood as a person's ability to deal with new things and unfamiliar things, then the right hemisphere also plays a leading role. So the controversy that used to be around with the left brain and right brain, this research is now saying both of them are very, very instrumental in helping the music to function, the songs, the writing, the paintings. I think this would be a topic for another time where we focus on the left brain, right brain controversy, but for now it's just to highlight that both of them play a big part in aiding creativity. I hope these are examples of the challenges that went from St. Martin to Trinidad, from Trinidad to Barbados, from Barbados to St. Lucia, to Grenada, to Montserrat, to St. Kitts. I don't know. I can try playing one of them for you to get an example. I hope it works. keep that on. Okay.
We're not seeing anything, Gertrude. It may be that you need to reselect which part of your screen you're sharing, and it may be that you need to turn on to include sound in your share.
Can you hear?
No. You may need to select to include your computer sound with share. It's not quite as straightforward as it looks.
Are you able to hear me, David?
No, we still can't hear anything at all.
Okay. Still cannot hear?
Still nothing. No, still nothing.
Okay. I think I will just. Okay. Maybe I'm not getting it work.
No, we haven't heard anything, Gertrude, I'm afraid.
Okay. Sorry about that. Let me go back to my screen sharing. Okay. I'm sorry that you're unable to hear. As I was saying, it's a pity that we are able to hear, but because the words are very, very important. What the words are giving a message as to how people should cope in the crisis, and each island had a different coping mechanism, but each of them related to the instructions that were given as to how we should use it, but we use it in our own way. So each island had a message for their people, and as I said, that was how it coped. Most people are coping. And one of the things that was done that I thought was very creative was to get, alongside the challenge of sending out messages to each Caribbean island as to how they could cope via music, the Caribbean Unity Song, where one person from each Caribbean island got together and sing a unity song, how the Caribbean coped during lockdown. I can share the links with you so that maybe in your lunchtime, your spare time, you can listen to them and see what's happening. But it's a pity that I'm not getting it work here, but it would be interesting to hear the messages and to hear what made life in the Caribbean a lot less easier during lockdown because of using creativity and innovation and music all combined. And when I say music, I'm going to include poetry that didn't have musical accompaniment, but the creative side really really, really came through. And these were some of the genres that they used: reggae, ska, dancehall, chutney, calypso, steel pan, merengue. And these are just some of the few genres within which those songs were constructed to say how to cope with the corona. My favorite, of course, would be the calypsos. I love the calypsos and the reggae because the messages were quite plain and quite strong. How we should, like one person said, to sanitize is just a reminder because we had been doing that all along anyway. You know, so it's like a lot of satire came out of it as well. It's so pity that we cannot hear them now. But I contend that whatever musical genre we have in the Caribbean could be done same way any place else to cope with whatever. Now, receiving, responding, and regurgitating. This reminds me of Gavin's presentation, because that's what used to be back then, and it is still what's now. Being creative is thinking outside of the box that I've put you in. So we are in a box, and we are expected to think out of that box. But for us to think out of the box, we need to come out of the box. And very often, we are out of the box and we leave the boxes and we go right back in them. So I'm going to suggest that for us to keep that creativity going, when we come out of a box, a particular box, we should burn that box, get rid of it. A new box will come. Get rid of all the boxes that we are out to come out. Just burn them and keep moving on, because your creativity will blossom and it will flow if you keep moving. And the education system have us all in boxes, so we need to come out. The encouragement is to come out of those boxes and think how we can change. And this is just a reminder of how the entire Caribbean has been and is still using music as a way forward. Music as a way to deal with crisis. Music as a way to deal with just about everything. But the reason why I'm focusing on crisis now is because we are still in the corona crisis, and the Caribbean is still using its musical genres to help the locals to cope. And I think from all appearances, from what I've heard, from the stories, the case studies, I think they're doing very well. So this is something that I wish that the ministries of education and people who are involved in education could think about using music in a way during crisis to benefit people. I would like to end this presentation now with one of my own personal quotes.